Go now? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm having a Chevy Chase moment here. This doesn't help. Okay. Hi. This is Court Rodnowski, the publisher of Yankee News, coming to you once again from the Parkway Diner in Stamford, Connecticut. On this Monday, what is it? December 29th, the year of our Lord 2025. Okay. I have been thrown into this, but I'm ready. I'm ready. All right, so with Mr. Producer, we had a little discussion, and I am going to lead with, actually, the connection is there are two different kinds of fraud to consider. Fraud is our theme this evening, but the first fraud that I'm going to talk about is the gross domestic product for the state of Connecticut. That's right, we can do that. Economists actually look at the gross domestic product of America on a state-by-state basis. And a body that is responsible for collecting the data and making sense out of it is the Federal Reserve in St. Louis, Missouri. So if you were to go look up Connecticut GDP, courtesy of the St. Louis Fed, you're going to find out the following. That for the last roughly 10 years, the GDP of Connecticut has been shrinking. Shrinking. I'm melting. But does the Connecticut press indicate any such thing? Of course not. You have your friends in the state government and the Department of Labor and the Department of Commerce, or whatever the relevant counterparts are to the federal government, who have to make stuff up. They have to play with the data, squunch it, squeeze it, twist it, malform it into whatever shape they need so that the lapdog media in Connecticut can faithfully report these mischaracterizations about the state of our economy. And it's worked. Nobody seems to be upset. Doesn't bother anybody that our GDP has been shrinking while the nation's GDP has been growing. That's a double whammy, okay? Now, I've talked about the Connecticut economy in other ways before, but if you've got the national economy growing and the state economy shrinking, there's a problem. There's a problem. Maybe some other time we'll get into it. But this kind of fraudulent misrepresentation is just in perfect keeping with the spirit of fraud that I want to talk about tonight. And that is, thank you, Minnesota. Thank you, Minnesota. The first line of my op-ed says, fraud is the bread and butter of journalism. There isn't a day that goes by where we don't hear about some kind of fraud. Corporate fraud, small business fraud, church fraud, and of course, big government fraud. And of these, the big government fraud is by far the worst. And I include Minnesota in that category, okay? So in essence, here's the problem. We have laws on the books that are supposed to prevent fraud. We have job descriptions, people who are hired for the purpose of preventing and detecting fraud. You have forensic accountants. You have certified fraud examiners. You have inspectors general, okay, or inspector generals. All these people, okay. Well, Curtis Sliwa talked about it today when he was subbing for Mark Simone on WOR. He put it simple, a lack of oversight. Well, I would add to that a lack of leadership responsible for oversight. We haven't been doing it. Now, let that then be the segue to where we start talking about Minnesota. And I'm going to deal with the first part first, and that is the incompetent boob of a governor that Mayor has. To think this guy could have been vice president of the United States. Talk about a scary thought, right? So Tim Walz, the best that now that he's sort of begun to recover from the shock of these revelations from Nick Shirley? Nick Sorter? What's the name of the investigative reporter, Mr. Producer? Was it Shirley? No.
Nick Shirley. Yep.
Nick Shirley, right. Okay. So as we know, Mr. Shirley, just him and his cell phone, he got the list of places to check out, and that was enough to blow things up, all right? So after the explosion set in and the dust was starting to settle on Tim Walz's ugly face, he began to come up with an explanation. What was his explanation? Oh, yeah, we caught one of them. Yeah, we've dealt with, yeah, we're on top of this. And we have some investigations going on. Well, Mr. Walz, I respectfully submit that this just highlights how incompetent you are, okay? If an investigative journalist can go out and find these things and show that the fraud is being committed in real time, and for you, everything is under investigation, you're not doing your job. You're not even close to doing your job. All the more reason to, one, throw you out of office, two, prosecute you, and three, that's right, throw you in jail. I can hardly wait. Let's just deal with this, ladies and gentlemen. So the first estimate was $1 billion. Now, the other problem is that some people have been complaining. They said there's no way that a bunch of Somali immigrants could run a scam like this on this scale with so many different organizations. You might be right. So there is a name. If I got it right, was it Amy Booth? Do you know? Did you see that name? Amy Booth, I think is the name. So she's this middle-aged woman. Was it Feeding the Future, I think was the name of the program. She runs it, and she puts Nancy Pelosi to shame as someone who knocks heads together and makes them scramble, makes them omelets. So she may turn out to have been the brains behind all these different acts of fraud. Stay tuned on her, we will see. But now the talk is it might be $8 billion. And now we're hearing a whisper number that it might even be more than $12 billion. All right, so it's nice. And by the way, I have to say it, and I know that others share my annoyance. I am very irritated with Ms. Bondi. I think she's not really doing a very good job. I gave her a C-. Well, no, there were a lot of failed cases. She ended up with a C-. So I give her a C- right now. So to get a C-, that means you get some things right and you get a bunch of other things wrong. Okay, well, she's got a whole bunch of things that she's still got wrong. And all she's getting is an extended grace period as a result of what's happening in Minnesota. She's taking the opportunity to make herself look good. And Kash Patel, oh my God, Kash Patel. I have pretty much lost faith in Mr. Patel. I now regard him as just another corrupt, deep state creature, okay? Wrote that wonderful book, came in full of promise, but it has not panned out. And if anything, he has become a part of them.
Bongino's leaving too.
Yes, well, I think Bongino is the one who's still able to preserve his integrity because he saw what was happening. He said, I'm not going to be a part of this. So good for you, Dan. And we can hardly wait for you to get back to your podcast. Okay, where do we go with this? The call to action, ladies and gentlemen, as far as all this fraud is concerned, is Justice Minnesota. Because now what's happening is the concept of fraud, by the way, if you look up the legal definition for fraud, there's at least half dozen different concepts of fraud. A charlatan is considered an example of fraud. So you have this, so we hear stories now about Ohio. We're being reminded about the extensive Medicaid fraud in California. There are rumblings now in Pennsylvania and New York, all right? And I have to remind you that when Doge was kind of at its height, Elon Musk pointed out that they had found fraud in every single federal agency. Fraud in every single agency. So what happened? We're still waiting for the prosecutions. Where are the perp walks? We haven't seen it. But the point is, this is the information that he found. He's put it out there, and we now know that it's true, that every last federal agency had some element of fraud in it. So fraud in this country is a huge, huge problem. And I'll throw out another one that I mentioned in the op-ed. As far as federal fraud is concerned, probably the worst of it are what are called community block grants. Community block grants are a creature of the war on poverty created in the 1960s. And to say that they've been abused over the years would be, an understatement. Okay, so that's enough on that. I'm going to move on to the next lovely subject. Yeah. Anyway, tell Tong time. Yes, Tong, you are well protected, as are all Connecticut communists. You are all well protected. And for Tina Peters, the truth is still in prison. Now, I'll be getting into, I did a little bit, just kind of coming back around on her stuff. But I and others have been pounding the same drum. What is the problem, Pam? This was a federal election in 2020 for which Tina Peters has held on to records. They affect the federal government. Why have you not taken her in as under a witness protection program with the federal government? You can do this. We've been waiting. And if you can't do it, explain it to us. Why? All right? We're adults. We can take it. So I want to know what the story is. Okay, but in the meantime, all these other a storm is building around Tina, and that's a good thing. All right, now I'm going to move on. All right. Now, Eric, I know you're bored. You're so tired of hearing about Ukraine and Russia. If you could just see the look on his face. Okay. We still have to talk about it, in part because of the peace talks. But there are these other things. Too bad. Our resident Russophile here, Wilm, is not here right now, but he will be joining us at some point, I'm sure. I need to remind the folks that even Russia has had to admit that they lost Kupiansk, the town of Kupiansk, all right? So Kupiansk is a smaller town north of Pavlovsk. And so they've actually been pushed out of there. Pride will not permit. Count on Putin to bring as many resources as he can on a renewed assault on the punky little village of Kupiansk. All right. Meantime, down the road a piece, in Pavlovsk, yes, the Russians do still hold a majority of Pavlovsk, but they have not taken over, and the Ukrainians have not been pushed out. It's a seesaw battle. Now, some commentators who happen to be pro-Ukrainian can see that in the next 4 to 6 weeks, if Russia keeps up the pressure, they could take over Pavlovsk. But again, at what cost? To what end? So I just need to remind you, by the way, while you have this slow-running battle going on over Pavlovsk, Mr. Putin, you can be sure that the Ukrainians are working very hard to build ever deeper, ever richer, ever more complex defenses outside of Pavlovsk once you break through, all right? So, and it's been pointed out that geographically, that whole region between Pavlovsk and Kiev, it is not a battleground that favors the invader, does not favor the invader at all. So whatever gains you think you've made, it's going to come at a cost, even bigger than the one you've seen before. So there's that. Now, President Trump made a rather bold statement about the peace plan. And he was offering to go in front of the Ukrainian parliament to pitch the plan. So we're told that they're, 90 to 95% of the way there? Did you read much about it? No? All right. So there was, the body language of Zelensky was not good, all right? So obviously he is being put under a lot of pressure to make territorial concessions.
He's asking for a 50-year guarantee or something.
Yeah, so they're trying to come up with these wacky things which will never be honored. None of the other agreements have been honored. The Minsk agreement wasn't honored, so what is this going to be honored? It's just moving from one mess to another. So we'll get into the other questions about Ukraine. There's been too much on it. All right, now the next thing I want to talk about, because we had this happen, you had the attack that President Trump launched on Boko Haram and other Muslims in Nigeria for attacking Christians. Good start. No one else did it. Now, I know that certain isolationists would not appreciate America doing things like that, but can we make an exception for Christian persecution? I just put him in a tough spot. You're in a tough spot. Yes, you are. Okay. We could get into that part later, but all right. So here I put up a link. There's an article on world trends in Christian persecution in other countries. A good website to go through is globalchristianrelief.org. Globalchristianrelief.org keeps a running tab on what is happening in each and every country around the world with regard to Christian persecution. So Nigeria is bad. We have persecution in India and many other countries. And so I put those up there for you to consider. But the general message is this. Because of a bias against Christians and Christianity in the American media and the European media, you don't hear that much about this. But if you're being objective and honest, you're going to be shocked at the amount of attacks and assaults being taken against Christians in every country around the world. Wasn't there something that Jesus said that we'll be assaulted? I don't exactly remember.
Not seasoned.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on now to the next problem. The dollar. When bad news is good news. All right, there was a big to-do. All right, big to-do. Because for the year 2025, the US dollar has become weaker, okay? That means other currencies are, quote, stronger against it. So here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. When a currency is, quote, weakened, all right, the cost for export to other countries goes down. So if we have a weaker dollar, then importers in Europe and South America and Africa and other places can look at those American goods and say, relative to other manufacturers of competing goods, including China, per tariffs, it makes more sense to buy the American product than their foreign counterpart. So we're going to see improved earnings in American companies as a result. Conversely, when the value of the currency, when you have a strong currency, all right, so that hurts exports, but it helps the domestic economy. So which is it, right? Now, the thing is, just to be clear, America has a strong domestic economy. I forget the number, but it's something like 60% of our GDP is domestic production. And then the other, 40% or less is exports, okay? Conversely, Germany has a huge export component to their economy, and they've been hurt by it as a result. And China has a huge export component, but they too understand this and for years have been trying to create a stronger domestic economy. So yeah, someday they may get there.
Velocity.
All right. Well, yes, velocity is part of it. Okay, so don't fret it if you're hearing that the dollar is weak, because it's going to improve the earnings of companies in America, and that's going to show up in the stock market. And I want to add to that even as we talk about the dollar weakening, the amount of investment that's coming into this country from other countries over 2026 will be substantial. All we have to do is talk about the data centers alone that are being built out at a rapid pace. You need lots of people to run those just for openers. All right, now, this is something that should upset us all. If nothing else, we know that what I now call the not-so-secret service has done a very lousy job of protecting those they're responsible for protecting. It's now been twice. People forget. It was September and December in which Code Pick showed up at a restaurant where President Trump was and staged a protest. Where was the Secret Service? Those babes should have been bum rushed out of there right away. You're just standing around letting this go on in an environment that's clearly not safe for the president and the people who are with him. And who else was a victim of this? That's right, Scott Bessent, our Secretary of Treasury. This is inconceivable, okay? So I'm going to leave you with a thought. Whoever's responsible for cleaning up the mess that is the Secret Service, the incompetents are still there, and they were also responsible for what happened in Butler, PA, okay? So, if you have the same people who screwed up in Butler, PA, still working in the Secret Service, what do you expect? Because who's going to clean it up? The Secretary, the Secret Service is the responsibility of the Department of Treasury. So, you guys got to get serious. I think part of it is you have too many agents. The numbers have grown dramatically. And as a result, you have a lot of incompetent agents. That might be part of the problem. But you have too many people who hate Trump as well who are still working there. And if there's any place where you have to clean that out, do I have to tell you? It's the Secret Service. So this stuff has got to end. We need a real Secret Service, not a phony Secret Service. Okay, this now, if you're still with me here I go. One more for good luck. The title is, The Potato is Still Hot. And nobody wants to touch this hot potato. I, of course, am referring to Jeffrey Epstein, the late Jeffrey Epstein, if he's dead. The title of this article, just to kick off the discussion, is Democrats Caught Hiding a Million Secret Epstein Documents in New York. Quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, unless there is substantial information in there kind of leaning in the direction of the theory I'm about to share with you, I don't care. So here's the theory. Let's start with the facts. One, he has rubbed shoulders with the rich and powerful on a scale that defies explanation, okay? If you're looking at his book, it's what? It's in the vicinity of 1,000 names. So from, let's say, 1980 roughly to 2015, he got to know over 1,000 people. Over a period of time, that's not too bad. But, well, who did he get to know? Well, one of the standouts, of course, were these billionaires, especially Jewish billionaires, who worked closely with him. Mr. Wexner being the one who's the most mysterious. If you ever bother to look him up, we might talk about him some other night. The other part is the political figures. Of course, he's big with Bill Clinton. The other one that people don't remember is Ehud Barak, who was the former prime minister of Israel. And of course, he'd been close buddies with Netanyahu, right? Okay, so that kind of paints the power picture, the people he knew. Now over here, we're going to talk about the money. So under his own control, we're led to believe it was on the order of $500 million. Supposedly recently, J.P. Morgan and Deutsche Bank released financial records, and this is supposed to give us some information. Okay, but the sorted thing that everybody's hanging on, which should be sorted out, but that's not the most important part of my theory, of course, are the perpetrators who were the pedophiles who, would have raped and abused these underage girls, right? That's the one where we want the answers. That's the one where nobody's going to go home happy until the perpetrator and the victim are put together and we know exactly what happened. We don't have that right now, and if anything, we've noticed the Department of Justice is doing everything it can to avoid making those connections. All right, let that rest. Let that rest. Let's talk about the real hot potato nobody's talking about. The theory I'm about to describe to you, nobody else I haven't heard it anywhere. If you've heard about it, you got to let me know because I haven't heard about it. So here it is. We know that, so take all those things, plus his work with the intelligence agencies, right? CIA, Mossad, MI6, probably did a few favors for the FBI, who knows? And others we probably don't even know about yet. All right, so you had all of that going on, plus the money, plus the people. That's a lot of stuff. What was the ultimate purpose for doing all this? There had to be a goal. There had to be some higher reason to which you committed your life over a period of decades to run all these things, take all these risks, do all these things where you could get yourself into trouble and do some of the most ungodly things to poor little girls and others that you were okay with, which, we'll never forgive them for. Okay, does anybody remember the Greater Israel Project? Well, if you didn't remember the Greater Israel Project, let me remind you. I'm guessing that this concept of the Greater Israel Project probably came about shortly after the nation of Israel was formed back in, what was it, 46, 48, 48? Yeah, 48. Okay, knowing that the way Israel was set up, it was in an extremely vulnerable position geographically. So we have to do something to ensure we'll say the geographic future of Israel. And what's the answer? Get more land. Expand the physical footprint of that which is considered Israel. All right, so the Greater Israel Project talks freely about acquiring the Sinai from Egypt, acquiring land from Jordan, acquiring land from Lebanon, from Syria, okay? And if you looked at the projected map for the Greater Israel, so let's say this is Israel, the Greater Israel is like this, okay? Starting to take up a significant chunk of real estate in the Mideast. Yeah.
There was also the Ben Gurion Canal that was proposed to compete with the Suez Canal.
Okay, all right, yeah. Fine. That would be a perfect part to add to that. Okay, so they wanted, in a sense, to become a real nation, not a nation sitting on the ledge of something in a desert. No, they wanted more than that. So in a way, you can't blame them, but the idea that you're somehow going to acquire land from the countries that are not exactly willing to even admit you exist, and now you're going to get some of their land, I see a problem there. I see a couple problems. But the point is that if they were going to persist in this idea of realizing the dream of the Greater Israel Project, you would have to do all the things that Jeffrey Epstein did. You would need the kind of political leverage that all these rich and powerful people could provide if you wanted to acquire more land. You had all the money to help provide the leverage to acquire all this land, okay? And you had the intelligence networks that would kind of soften the ground, okay? And prepare as you make your move to acquire all that land. So that is my theory, ladies and gentlemen. The sole purpose in existence of Jeffrey Epstein, for all the rotten things that he did, was in service of the Greater Israel Project. So there's my theory, and right now I'm sticking to it. Okay, so now we're going to move on. I just need to mention this in passing. All you fans who like to watch The Shawshank Redemption, you ever watch The Shawshank Redemption? Many times. Great movie, great movie. So if you remember from Morgan Freeman, the issue was that as a young man, he stupidly murdered someone, and he was in prison for 30-some years, until finally when he said, I don't give a shit, Sonny, about what you're going to do. I don't care. You can stamp whatever you want on my form. Well, that's when they let him out. Well, I think The Shawshank Redemption has gotten to a bunch of civic-minded parole review officials in the state of Massachusetts, because we have The Shawshank Redemption on steroids. 39 convicted murderers who were sentenced to life without parole having been released. Now, as one shining example, Roger Francis, who's now 78, was 20 when he shot and killed a 15-year-old. Okay, so he's been in prison for 58 years. And they decided, well, what's he going to do at the age of 78? So let's let him have the last few years of his life. We'll set him free. Rinse and repeat 38 more times. Are we okay with this? Not really. But it's it's going to be interesting to see who commits a crime there. All right? We've seen this before. We've seen this before. Okay, speaking of before, this is unbelievable. Lawfare Soros-backed NGO teaching D.C. residents how to sneak onto juries and rig trials against President Trump. It's a group called Free DC. It's tied to another group called Community Change and Community Change Action. They run trainings to promote jury service as a political weapon against President Trump. Now, in my book, that's jury tampering. Of course, they're getting away with it in D.C. They have too many friends. But properly speaking, these guys belong in jail. You don't go around intentionally setting up a situation where people lie their way onto a jury and then screw up the results. No, no. But I just want to let you know what's happening, okay? Oh, Tim Walz. All right, first his daughter. I don't know if you saw it. His goofy daughter, Holly Walz, did a TikTok. She did a TikTok rant wishing a Merry Christmas to all the illegal aliens who have been captured by ICE agents. We appreciate the sentiment, Hope. Meantime, let's see here. We got these companion pieces here. All right, I'll remember you again about Nick Shirley, who has really, someday he's going to win an award for this. This is amazing. So little in the way of time and money was spent to cause this huge explosion. Because it's right there in front of you all the time. We've been hearing about this for at least 3 years now, okay? And you had the press ignoring it, others ignoring it. You had the governor dismissing it until now, and all of a sudden he said, oh yeah, we captured one of them. Oh yeah, right, BS. Okay, so this lake, spend some time. So definitely go to yankeet.news, look up the latest news, the link, and you will find it there so you can listen to that. At what point do you realize you need to stop listening to someone? Okay? At what point does the person babble enough in a way that is disconnected from reality that you realize, well, I can't take this person seriously? Problem is, the person is the governor of Minnesota. He can't help but talk about white supremacy and all other kinds of nonsense that have nothing to do with the nature of the fraud that was committed. But this is what liberals do all the time. They talk in one direction while ignoring the facts in the other. So we have that there for you. I'd love for you to see it. Okay, the pot is being stirred. You can see the fumes coming up. The pot's beginning to bubble. It's a good sign. Okay, Tina Peters, getting a little more heat, but Pam Bondi's not doing her job. You get her out of there. Federal Witness Protection Program. I don't know, an executive order making her a protected federal witness. Can an executive order do that? Well, let's get jiggy. Meantime, though, I want to start with a comment that Steve Bannon made when he had Tage Gill on, who is an ex-Navy SEAL, and the two of them were getting into it. And they were ready to go. They were ready to go. And by the way, if I wasn't doing other things, I'd be ready to go too. Oh, so, Polis has decided he has to up the security for Tina. Instead of nobody watching her, now he's got 4 security guards. We talked about this last week, I think. Okay, so Steve and Tage started to go on about, look, if they're not doing anything about it, Tage, are you ready to go? Tage says, hell yeah, lock and load, baby, I'm ready. He's got a few buddies too. Do not think for 1 minute that if the situation presents itself, they will not do it. I had made that point last week and I'm making it again because you, Governor Polis, are a jerk. The lowest level of scummy jerk because all you can do is hide the truth. And you're going to ruin somebody else's life because you got to hide the truth and protect all you other worthless Democrats. And I do mean worthless. Okay, because of all of this, this to me is a sign that the pot's being stirred. Look at that, it's bubbling. I like it. So Tina had to put out a press release saying, no, I am not a part of this. I'm not a party to this. I do not condone in any way whatsoever the very idea of a prison break. Wink, wink. Okay, but she had to put that out there. Okay, Polis, oh my God. Do you have any idea how pissed off people are at you? I mean, the depth of the anger that you're generating and how much you're radicalizing people. Do you have any concept? I don't think you do, okay? Until it hits you in the ass. Until it hits you in the ass, okay? So I hope your press release, your publicity people are ready to go for you. Oh my God. All right, moving on here. What's the next thing? Okay, so we got that. All right, just quickly about aspartame. The juries, I mean, we have all these claims that aspartame is safe. And the Wikipedia entry just goes on and on about this, but you have other people who have other things to say. So I put the information up there. There are a couple other references. Nothing is as it seems. And by the way, the other thing that's not being talked about with respect to aspartame, and I got it's just my last thing is about silver, if you don't mind. I got to talk about silver. Okay, so there's aspartame. I'll remind you what's cool about it is 2 amino acids that makes a sweetener. The peptide sweetener world, stevia is another peptide sweetener, just something to tell you about, okay? All right, the last thing I want to talk about tonight is, what's the matter? What are you looking for? All right, okay. Okay. So, silver. Oh my goodness. So, Clive Thompson, thank you very much for your take on what's going on with silver. Now, the price of silver went down today, but before Monday, you know, there's been this run up, and now what, $71, $72 an ounce, unprecedented. There's a historical basis. You go back to the Hunt brothers in the 70s, but here, what we're looking at is a potential explosion in the value of silver. So Clive was pointing out that there is a discrepancy between the supply and demand of about 200 million ounces. So 1,100 million ounces demand, 900 million supply. There's a disparity. All right, the industrial need for silver is considerable. So what's funny about it is that all right, first of all, China provides 60 to 70% of the silver in the world, and it's China which has now imposed these new export restrictions on silver. Now you got to jump through all these bureaucratic hoops in order to be able to get silver out of the country. So already you have a shortfall. Now China's going to make it even more difficult, where they're the leading supplier of silver in the world. Okay. So what's going to happen? If, okay, the solar industry, major consumer of silver, autos, tech, okay, and a special shout out to JBK, the mechanic's mechanic in John Shepard. John Shepard? Why?
Shout-outs.
Shout-outs to John Shepard, but JBK? Who's JBK? All right, well, it doesn't help the audience. They don't know who JBK is.
They will.
All right, they will, but so it's a shout-out. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, keep a sharp eye on the price of silver, because I'm thinking that this baby is going to take off like a rocket. Now, I say that with a proviso that there's probably hidden inventories of silver that can help to smooth out this divergence in supply and demand. We'll see, but right now, it's a mess, and China's just making it worse. All right, well, I'm going to put in a plug, my wonderful haircut that I got today, from the Palm Barber Shop. Those are my guys. Those are my guys. You know where the Palm Barber Shop is? Eric, you know where it is? Right across from the YMCA in Greenwich. It's down in a little, yeah, you see, drive by it. Great, the Tommy, old guy, he knows how to cut hair, I'll just say. Okay, that's it until next week. Thank you very much.